7 men came with AK-47s. I think they wanted to take me somewhere else and torture me. Yeah. But because the world now knew what had happened, their faces were there. And the prison officers were like my brothers. I was even sending some of them to my home.
Welcome to a very, very special and final episode of season 1 of With Nyasha Michelle. And I couldn't have finished it with any better guest, guys. I am extremely interested and excited about hearing from this person. Joining me is, how do I describe you? You are a documentary filmmaker, human rights defender. I've heard someone call you that. You're an investigative journalist. I'm joined by none other than Hopewell Chin'ono. I said it right?
Yes, you said it right. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you very, very much for joining me. I'm excited for this conversation. And I appreciate you saying
I'm
yes.
excited too because I've been a fan of your work.
Oh.
So when I was driving to come to your studio, there was also a bit of excitement and nervousness.
Yeah. Is that why you never asked me? What are you going to be asking me, Nyasha?
Yeah, it was. I think for me, it was more about trust. I've said I'm dealing with a professional.
Oh, thank you.
It's not going to be a hatchet job.
No, don't worry. We do things properly here.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that we love to start this show is I always ask each guest, what is one defining moment that set you on the path that you're on today?
I think the one defining moment that set me on the path that I traveled leading up to today was a moment way back in 1990. I was doing my A-levels. And I always used to challenge the teachers about certain things, why things are this way or that way. And I challenged an editor of a very popular magazine in Zimbabwe called Price Beat. His name was Mr. Makelwen. And he invited me to come to his office.
Yeah.
And I told him that some of the articles that I'm reading, they could be written in a better way. And he challenged me to it. And that's what set me off to become a journalist.
Really?
Yes.
What did you write for him? When he I assume that's what he did. When he challenged you, did he challenge you to write something or to change something, or what you would maybe do differently with what they'd already put out there? So
I grew up in a family where I was the last born, and the brother that I came after, his name was Blessing. Unfortunately, he's late now. He used to bring a lot of reggae music, so reggae records, vinyl.
Yeah,
and it is what gave me the political consciousness to what was happening around the world, because it always talked about poor people being subjected to repression by governments. And because of my love for reggae music, I used to expect quality articles about reggae music. So that's what I challenged Mr. Makelwen on. And I said, your quality of reggae articles is very poor.
Wow.
So it was very interesting that he took me on and he said, okay, why don't you write?
Yeah.
And since you're saying that it could be better, I'll give you the opportunity to write and I'll even pay you for it.
Wow.
Yes.
So what was the first article that you wrote?
So I was thrown into the deep end.
Yeah.
And I've written about this before on social media. I interviewed a man who at that particular time was the biggest reggae superstar, Dennis Emmanuel Brown. He'd come for a big show in Zimbabwe, and the editor of Price Beat magazine said, "Oh, since you always complain that we don't write these things properly, I want you to go and interview Dennis Brown and write an article on that. And it was so funny because I was a high school student at Marlborough High.
Yeah, I was going to ask how old you were.
Yes, I was a high school student. I was 18. I was a high school student at Marlborough High. So I went to Holiday Inn Hotel wearing my school uniform. I went to the interview after school. So I was wearing my school uniform. And when I got there, his wife, I think her name was Yvonne, she opened their hotel door. And she was like, Dennis, there's a schoolboy here, you know. So he came to the door, and then I had to explain that I'm here to interview. I'm the guy who's going to interview you. And he found it hilarious, and he said, "Come in," you know.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I think it gave me so much confidence because after the interview, he said, out of many interviews I've done, I've never been interviewed with someone who knew a lot about me, and we didn't have internet then. So the research was based on reading magazines about him. And he said, he had never met a journalist who knew a lot about reggae music outside of Jamaica and outside of I think he said Britain and America, and that gave me confidence. And when I did the article, the editor was so impressed. He said, "Okay, you will now continue writing for us," and that's what set me onto journalism.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I do want to ask you one of the questions I was going to ask you is how you got into not just journalism though, investigative journalism, but we'll tackle that a bit later.
Yes.
For now, you know what I want this conversation to be? I want this conversation to be one where we get to know Hopewell, right? Beyond what a lot of people know you for, the journalism, and you're very outspoken. So I want to take it back a little bit to, you already mentioned you are the last child.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about your childhood in Zimbabwe, your family makeup, and some of the things that made you who you are now.
Yeah. So my dad was a senior civil servant. I think he was the second most senior civil servant at Mrewa Growth Point. That's where I grew up. And I partly went to school at Mrewa Mission. And my mom was a home economics teacher. So it was growing up. As I was growing up, I was the only child at home. The other four had left. And so there was no work for girls or boys because I was the only child there. So I had to do everything. So, for instance, when I was in grade 2, I could bake scones.
No.
I had to do dishes. We had a maid, but I had to do dishes because she would go away over the weekend and I had to do dishes. So, I mean, I look back and say part of who I am today is because of that. That's why I always encourage young parents on social media that you should not create work for boys and girls. You should just allow your children to know how to do everything, to clean the house, to clean the dishes, and to bake scones. And I think as I was growing up at that time, it was a very patriarchal society. It was not as liberated as it is today, where women have got undeniable rights, because everything to do with the home was supposed to be done by women. And my mom said, "No, this is not how we do things." And I think I was lucky because my parents were the first from their families who had gone to college, and so their outlook on life was completely different, especially on my father's side. He was the only child of his father who had gone to school. So his attitude towards life was completely different, and how he behaved in his marriage with his wife, my mom, was completely different from his other brothers. So, my mom could say no to certain things, whereas women of that generation wouldn't say no to their husbands. Yeah, so I think it's a part of life that is still with me today.
Yeah. And if I was to talk to any of your friends and I asked them, describe Hopewell to me, what would they say?
I think I'm somebody who's not scared. I'm not scared. And
Definitely.
and that actually scares me. It scares me because there are times, I guess we're going to talk about this. For instance, when I was in prison, when I would sit there and say, oh my God, how did I get to do that? You know, but I think in faced with adversity, I'm not scared, and it's something that I think I get from my father, and also from my mother, because I've never. You see, I think kids emulate their parents.
Yeah.
So how they see their parents behave, they ape that. So, for instance, in 1979, when I was grade 2. My father had a massive disagreement with the district commissioner. His name was, I think, Deft Williams or Deft Myrams. And he said my dad stood his ground. And I was there because he drove to our house. And my father would not allow a situation where he's humiliated in front of his wife and his child. And he said, if I come back and you're still here, I'm going to shoot you.
Wow.
And my dad said, I'm fine with it. Wait when you come back and see whether you're going to shoot me. What I'm saying is the right thing. You're trying to get me to do the wrong thing, and I'm not going to do that. And it's something to do with their work. I can't remember what exactly it was, but something to do with their work. And he was trying to get my father to do something that was illegal. And it involved having to lie. And my father said, no, he's not going to do that. And unfortunately, he never got back. Because they were going from Rewa into an area called Uzumba. And because this district commissioner was very arrogant, he was told that you can't use the shortcuts because they are likely mined. And unfortunately, he disregarded that advice and he drove on top of a mine and he was killed.
That was it.
Yeah. Yeah, but at that moment for me, it lives with me. And my father later told me when I was an adult that he did it for me. He said, I did it for you. I was not going to allow another person to disrespect me in front of my child because, as he put it, it was going to rub off my child and you would think that people in authority are supposed to be obeyed even when they're wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when I think about the type of defiant person you are, that we've all seen you to be, clearly your father knew what he was doing because it defined what we have seen you do and say and the values that you've stood up for. Now, whilst that has been great, you telling me that, I also think that's something that I know, I've seen, right? What is another thing maybe from a more like maybe social aspect, whatever that could be, that another way that your friends would say, this is how Hopewell was like?
Well, when I was at school, I was always the center of attraction because I loved reggae music.
Okay, yeah.
And so what I used to do is like when we had what was called discos, they would come once a month, and I would go on stage, take the microphone and start to DJ the way people like Shabba Ranks, Vibes Cartel do it. And so I was very popular at school, both at Mrewa Mission and when I went to Skyh High School for my O-levels and Marlborough High School for my A-levels. I was very popular for that. And so they gave me this name, Daddy Hope, which is stuck.
That is your ex, formerly known as Twitter handle, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And so a lot of people ask me that, why did you call yourself this? I said, no, I never called myself that. It was people around me who called me that. And it goes back, I think, to the, late 80s.
Wow.
So I grew up in Glenora.
Okay.
I grew up in Glenora. And when I went to journalism school and I was writing articles and people in the community were reading about them, youngsters around then identified with me as somebody they emulate, and they want to be like me. So you'd find that when someone is called Robert, they would go on their electric, those electric poles in Zimbabwe, the ones made out of concrete, and they would go and write, Daddy Robert. If they're called Herbert,
Wow.
Daddy Herbert. So it was great in that, whatever I was doing was also inspiring young people.
Who's your favorite reggae artist then?
My favorite reggae artist is Bob Marley.
Why?
But that's too obvious.
It
because
is.
Everyone
but
says so.
He still can be. He still can
Yes.
be.
But I enjoy Barry Salmond. Is one of my favorite reggae artists. And from the DJ side, I was a great fan, and I'm still a great fan of Buju Banton.
Yeah.
Because of his deep lyrics. And I also want to have fun, so I listen to Shabba Ranks.
Shabba Ranks. Being a Zimbabwean child, because I was in Zim until I was 12.
Yes.
Reggae music is part. It's like it's in our blood.
It is.
I don't know if it's every person or every family, but my family definitely. Like I remember being very young, before the age of 9, and there's parties going on in the neighborhood. It's like around 11, 12 midnight, and there was like Jamaican music was just part of our culture. But I only know it from a social perspective.
That's
For
true.
you, I imagine I know that it's beyond socially. What was it like for you? What did reggae music mean? Especially as a Zimbabwean person, especially when it comes to communicating about freedom and just speaking out for what's right.
I think for me, reggae music, it gave me answers that I was looking for. For instance, why are we poor? Why do we live in abject poverty, and yet the other side of town, they're so rich? And it didn't just give the answers, but it gave a certain level of political consciousness. When you had people like Winston Rodney Benningspear singing about Marcus Garvey, and also demystifying the lies. That way, in our history books, when he was singing about Christopher Columbus, calling him a damn liar, just like the situation we have in Zimbabwe, where Victoria Falls was discovered by Deft Livingstone as if there were no people that lived there.
As if it never existed, and we didn't even have a name for it already.
So I think growing up in the townships, and partly in rural Murewa, we didn't have access to literature, to books, like kids who grew up in affluent areas.
Yeah.
So listening to reggae music for me was actually like going into a lecture, and you listen to this deep music. He's talking about liberation. He's talking about the bald head, the oppressors, and he's telling you to get up, stand up, and fight for your own rights. And so it wasn't just music for fun for me. I learned a lot from reggae music, and that's why I continue to play it today. I even became a singer at some point.
Tell me about that. I love the fact that you are the one who's mentioned that. Tell me about that.
We'll be right back.
All right, I just have to interrupt the podcast for this exciting opportunity: home ownership. If you're dreaming of owning a modern, secure home in Zimbabwe, listen up. This is for you. Velda Estates is making that dream into a reality with Spitzkop Gardens, a brand new gated community to the west of Harare. They've got stands available right now, and the best part, you get to build your home from a selection of sleek, modern designs. So whether you're planning your first home or looking for a smart investment, this is the place to be. So don't wait. These stands won't last forever. Hit up Velda Estates on Facebook, Instagram, their website, or you can even call them. All the details are on the screen. So get started on building the future you deserve. Now back to the show.
Now, back to the show.
So when I was at journalism school, I was frustrated by a lot of things. one, I'd gone for the interviews, the admission interviews at the journalism school in Zimbabwe. And they were so tight because the Zimbabwe Institute of Mass Communications at Harare Polytechnic was the only one in the country that was a public institution of repute. And it had a quota system for South Africans because they were not yet independent.
Yeah.
So you had people coming from ANC and PAC. In fact, one of my classmates is now a general in the South African Army. He's the military attaché of South Africa to Russia.
Wow.
We were in the same class, and when you look at all those things that were happening, I was faced with a situation where I went to college, I applied, I went through the interviews. There were 2, and then I never heard from them. And one day, because we were boys, we were bored staying in the township, so we would go uptown to the city and, drink alcohol. So I met a guy who I'd set those interviews with, and he was a popular radio personality, Comfort Mufana. So he said, so why didn't you come to school? I was like, what do you mean school? He said, no, we started today. I was like, but I never heard anything.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I had not made it.
Yeah.
So the next day I went to the college, and when I got there, I went into the administrative block. I met a lecturer. His name was Ogandoro. And I said, you never wrote back to me to tell me whether I had passed or not. And he went through the pigeonholes. He says, oh, your letter is here. You're supposed to be in class.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then when I joined others, my sister, who was a teacher, she's now retired, felt that there was an act of corruption. She was very strong about it. She said they wanted to give this place to someone else. That's why they had not told you. So I was very upset with what had happened. And then when we started classes, we had an association, so student leaders. And then I ran for the presidency for mass communications, and I won. But the head of the mass communication department, Mr. Gerard Swela, called me to his office, and he was with second in command, Mr. Tim Nyahunzwe, and they said, we know you have won, but we want you to step aside. It's a complex situation. You won't understand it. And I said, but I won.
Yeah. A free and fair election.
And the guy that became the president was from the military. His name was Charles Shondegwa.
Okay.
He was put there. I didn't understand at the time, but the system did not want somebody they didn't know to become president of this union of students in the mass communication department, because apparently they treated mass communication as a sensitive department because we were going to go into newsrooms and then start writing things. So they wanted someone who could maintain the interests of the government. So this is a guy who came from the military public relations department. And I wish I could meet him and talk about it, but unfortunately it's now late. But when I look back, I then realized that there was some kind of internalized anger in what had happened, to say, these people, they didn't want me in. And now I'm in. They're stopping me from becoming president of the Students Association. And then I joined a group called Seven Seals. It was a breakaway from a popular group called Transit. And it was one of their 2 lead singers. But I was mainly on the DJing side, like doing the stuff that Buju Banton does. And then there was the lead singer. And some of the songs that I wrote were defined by those moments.
Okay.
That Babylon wants to destroy us. But luckily at that time, the authorities didn't know what Babylon was, and they didn't realize that Babylon
it's them.
It's reggae addiction about them.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my biggest moments as a singer, and I was still at journalism school, was when we played alongside the reggae group Third World when they came to Zimbabwe. So it was an amazing moment for me. And when I look back, I was actually asked to write an article about myself by the Qatar Rule of Center, and I remember that incident. I was like, this has to go into this article. Yeah.
But reggae gave you the opportunity to also be express how you felt.
That's
and
true.
Call out oppression.
That's true.
So why didn't you pursue it?
I guess my passion was in journalism.
Okay.
But reggae gave me the platform to do so many things, to write about society, to reflect about society, and to have a conversation about how things were being done in Zimbabwe, and listening to people like Burning Spear, Bunny Wailer, listening to Bob Marley. I remember, I think it was around 1988 or 1990. I can't remember the exact year. It must have been 1990. I sat with my father watching Burning Spear live in Paris. And my father, was like, oh, he sings a lot of serious stuff. Because my father was trying to stop me from this reggae thing, because it was associated with smoking weed.
Oh, yeah.
It was associated with Rastafarians, having dreadlocks. But my mom stood their ground and said, let him listen to the type of music he wants to listen to.
Yeah.
My dad was the type of person who would listen to Jim Reeves and Across the Bridge. So I was like, no, this is not my type of music.
For you.
And I at that time I think my mom just stood for me. At that time, I was dating a certain young lady. She was 2 years older than me.
Okay.
And she went to France. She was part of ISAC. I know she won't mind me mentioning this. Her name is Cherry Chanesa. So she went to France as part of ISAC.
Yeah.
And then she brought me this double album called Massive.
Okay.
It was a reggae album because she knew I liked reggae music. When we were dating, I always used to take her to reggae nightclubs, And she brought this album, and then I remember I took it to my parents' place in Mrewa. They were now my dad was now retired. My mom was no longer working, and so my mom was listening to this, and she said, "Oh, can you leave this with me?"
Yeah.
And I always remember that moment fondly, because it was a moment where my mother made me understand that she's going to allow me to listen to what I want to listen to.
Yeah.
She's not going to be judgmental about it. But she always reminded me that you must focus on your books. You'll go far, and you can listen to more reggae music when you're on your own, when you've made it. Yeah. So it was my mother who actually said, you can listen to this music. It's okay. And I'll explain later how it actually helped me later in life.
Okay.
So one of my friends, when I was growing up, was called George Nechronga. He was a famous footballer, and he won the Soccer Star of the Year competition alongside Peter Ndlovu. It was a joint.
Yeah.
And Peter then came here to the UK, played for Coventry, and this friend of mine was in the Zimbabwe national team, went to Namibia. When Namibia became independent, there was a big football match, and he met Zig Marley and his manager.
Wow.
In Namibia. His manager's name is Hatino Henry, popularly known as Skyh High. So he came with a bunch of records. So my friend was more interested in the records. But when I asked him if I could go and play some of them, I got home and I went on the sleeve of the album and I saw an address with a phone number. And so I jotted them down. So when I was doing my internship, I asked my editor, I said, I want to do a story on reggae music. Can I use the phone to call Jamaica? And he said, okay, that's fine. So I called this guy and we started talking. So he would call me and I would call him. And then one Monday, it was a Monday afternoon, I got a call. I was called that there's a call Hopewell. I went, hello. He says, yeah, it's Skyh High. See you tomorrow. Me fly to Harare tomorrow. Me and my wife. British Airways morning flight. See you tomorrow. I was like, wow, this guy is coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, not planned anything. So we were so excited. I didn't have a car, and George didn't have a car. So I went back home and told George that Skyh is coming tomorrow. And, he was like, what? I said, yeah, he's coming tomorrow. So we went to the airport and I hired a car. And now we were so embarrassed that, oh my God, how are we going to move around with him? But he solved that headache for us because he hired a car and he was living in at Holiday Inn. They were just there for a couple of days. But one of the most important things that changed my life was when he asked me what I wanted to do. And then I explained to him that I'm studying journalism. I'm about to finish the next year and I'll see how it goes. So he then said to me, you have to travel the world. The world is so big.
Yeah.
And Africa needs people that have traveled the world.
Yeah.
And you can't fight Babylon when you don't understand Babylon. So I think you should think about studying in England. And that was just a turning point for me. So he facilitated everything for me to come to England. And that's how I came to England to study. It was through him. So I've always said that reggae music at different stages did different things for me.
It did.
It gave me political consciousness. It gave me an opportunity to write about big stars. And it gave me an opportunity to come to England and study. And so even today when we talk, sometimes he posts a picture which I think must be 32 years old now.
Wow.
He posts it on his Instagram and Facebook, and he says, he uses me as an example of how he contributed to Africa's awareness. So he always says, I met this youth when he had nothing, and I helped him to become who he is. Today he's a big voice in Zimbabwe, talking against corruption.
Yep.
Talking against oppression.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reggae did a lot for me.
It made such a massive difference in your life. I knew of your love for reggae music, but I didn't know that it goes that deep.
Yes.
And that's very interesting because when it comes to your investigative journalism, you've gone deep. But before we get to some of the things that you have exposed, some of the work that you've done that has led you to prison, how did you then get into journalism? Tell me a little bit about that, and if there is one story that you worked on first that really left a mark on you.
So I when I came to England, I came on a Commonwealth visa. There was this Commonwealth visa which anyone from the Commonwealth would get. It allowed you to work. And also you could then study after that. And so Skyh High helped me to come to England, paid my fares and everything. Wow. And then he gave me some money to say, you can start off.
This man believed in you. Sorry, hold on. This was after you guys had built a relationship where essentially all you used to do was just speak on the phone.
Yes.
And then he calls you, I'm coming to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Comes to Zimbabwe. Yeah. You guys have this conversation.
Yes.
And you tell him, and he's like, this is...
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was very interesting because his wife kept telling me that I've spoken to you. You're going to go far.
Well, okay. They saw that in you.
At that point, it didn't make sense to me. I was like, oh, I just want to go and have fun with my friends. We had a lot of CDs he brought for us.
Yeah.
But before I left Zimbabwe, because I had so much music that he had given me, I then started DJing in clubs.
Okay.
When I was at journalism school. And that's when this name Daddy Hop really stuck.
Okay.
Because I was DJing, playing reggae. And at the time there was a guy his name was William Sinclair. He was a Jamaican guy who had moved to Zimbabwe after independence. So he was like he ran the biggest sound system called Stereo One. And it got to a point where, they have reggae clashes, sound system clashes, and I would go and clash with him. And there's an article that was written about it, which I'll give you later.
Yeah.
It's online. And when I look back, I was like, wow, I was clashing with these people. And so the first time when I came to England was in February 1994, because Skyh High and his wife said, we want you to go and see. And when I was at the Zimbabwe Institute of Mass Communications at Harare Polytechnic, I was dating someone who was studying engineering. And she cut short her course, her program. She came to England. And we kept talking to each other on the phone. There was no internet, so we're talking on the phone, and she would tell me how great things are. So I said to Skyh High, I know some people that I can go and stay with. You don't have to worry about because they were trying to arrange accommodation. I said, no, I know some people. So when I came here, England, I was just living, I think 3-4 minutes away from here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot though, right?
Michael Farah had a house. And in fact, the tube station that we used to use was Elephant and Castle. So when he told me that you're in Elephant and Castle, I was like, oh, that's my hood.
Wow.
So I came here, and there was the biggest reggae distributor in England at that time was called Jetstar. So I went there, bought some music, and then went there the next day and told them that, I came here, and I explained to the owner of the place how I came here. And he said, oh, Skyh High, that's my brethren, Let me call Skyh High. So he called him. And he said, I've got this youth from Africa, he's saying he knows you. So he says, yeah, that's my youth, give him 100 records, let him choose whatever he wants. So I left that place with lots of records. and so I was now running, I joined a sound system called Sweet Ebony in Zimbabwe. So I was playing music, and it was fun. It's very fun because reggae music has got different facets in my life, from consciousness and listening to what the world is about. I always tell my South African friends that I first understood about apartheid through reggae music. Because I don't think there's any group of people more than reggae musicians that sang so much about apartheid, from Banuela with a song called Botha the Mosquito, and so many artists. And so it gave us a lot of consciousness as we were growing up. But it also gave me an opportunity to become a journalist, and it became a bridge for me to come to England. And when I came to England, I got the Commonwealth visa. And then I worked a bit, and then I went to City University where I did my first master's in international journalism.
By the way, I studied there. I did my master's in journalism there as well.
Oh, really? Did you do the international one?
No, I did TV journalism.
Oh, TV journalism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
During our time, there was no TV journalism.
Oh, really?
It was there, but it was part of. It was a diploma, postgraduate diploma, yeah. So I opted to go to the Masters in International Journalism. And then there was either print or radio.
Oh, yeah.
So I went for radio. And then what gave me an insight, I grew up listening to the BBC World Service, like most people in Africa.
Africa, yeah.
And My father always made me listen to the World Service. At that time, I felt, this old man is making me listen to this nonsense. But it had a lasting impact that helped me in the future.
Yeah.
So when I was at City University, we were supposed to go on an internship. So the natural place for me to go was the BBC. So I went to the BBC, Bush House, under Robin White. He was the boss then. And oh my God, I was like, all the things that I knew about journalism, you suddenly look at these people and like, I didn't know much.
Yeah.
You know?
That's how I felt when I got into it. Yeah.
And I remember one incident.
Yeah.
It was winter. And Robin White said to me, I want you to do an interview with the agriculture minister in Zimbabwe. His name was Kumbra Kangai. That's when Mugabe was ratcheting up this thing about taking the farms. It was 1999. And, I don't know whether you worked at Bush House.
No.
So at Bush House, there was this big studio for Focus on Africa and for there was Focus on Africa and there was Network Africa. So there was this big studio where the program was presented from. So for some funny reason, Robin said, I want you to do the interview from there. Because we used to do the interviews in a little cubicle. You call the person and you start recording. And so it was him, Josephine Hesley, quite a number of them. So they all came to stand there and watch me, and I was so nervous, sweating, and I'm like, oh my God, what if I get things wrong? So I'm now speaking to this minister. And this minister, when he identifies that I'm Zimbabwean, his default is to expect me to be very respectful, like Zimbabwean journalists were at the time.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be asking me difficult questions kind of thing, Yeah. But I've got Robin White who's standing there and has been teaching me about being serious, not just being serious, but to grill people. And the idea was that you should grill them to a point where the truth comes out.
Yeah.
So that was one moment that sticks with me up to now. And when I look at how I engage the Zimbabwean political class, I see that they get angry. When I talk about Mnangagwa or Chamisa, the opposition leader, they get angry with me because we grew up in a country where there was only one TV station. And up to now, there's still only one TV station. So culturally, we grew up thinking that TV is what we see on Zimbabwe television. How journalists behave was our understanding of journalism. And when you leave the country and for years and then you go back, the cultural sensitivities that were shaped, that have shaped that society, are no longer valid to you because, especially in my case, I mean, you spent like 9 years watching Jon Snow, Jeremy Paxman, and then you go back to Zimbabwe and they expect you to be like Ruben Barwe. and so even up to now, I'll tell you a little story. A couple of weeks ago, the main opposition leader blocked me on Twitter.
I saw that.
and today he unblocked me.
Yeah.
And so I wrote about it today, explaining that, the role of journalists is not to pander to the egos of politicians, but to make sure that we bring out the truth and we critique them where they get things wrong.
Okay.
And that's how nations grow. And as you can see in this country, in Britain, and even in South Africa, they'll call each other names in parliament. But after that, they'll go for a pint. That culture is not yet there in our society. We've got a binary system in the way we think that it's either you support ZANU. If you don't support ZANU, then you support the other side. There's no room for you not to support both of them.
Yeah.
And there's no room for you to say, I will support who does the right thing. You're supposed to stick with a particular political figure, and whether they do wrong or right, you're supposed to stick with them. And I think it's partly to do with the way our society has been shaped, not just in the past 45 years, but in the past 100 years. Because even if you look at colonial structures, they were like that as well. You were either with Smith or you're a terrorist. Mugabe comes, you are either with me or you're a Western puppet. And I think it requires us to, a couple of days ago, I wrote on Twitter and Facebook about the need for us to understand as Zimbabweans that our country needs the diaspora a lot more than we can imagine. Because if we say we have 95% unemployment in Zimbabwe, it means the big brains are not there. Because the big brains don't stick around when nothing's happening. And when you say these things, people think you're insulting those that stayed home. But no, you're speaking into the realities of a new nation. If we manage to get change, if we loosen the ZANU-PF grip, change will mean people like yourself having to sacrifice and come back home. We will need to clean up Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. The quality needs to change. And the people that have stayed, they are conditioned to the things that we're fighting. And we need a lot more talent to come back home and say, no, this is how we're supposed to do things. Because I've looked at societies where there was some kind of change, but that change did not entail a new way of doing things. So we need change that does not only change the politicians, but that changes the mindset of our society.
So you've literally hit the nail on the head, because one of my questions was going to be, what change do you think needs to happen in Zimbabwe? So you've explained it, but how is that possible? How can Zimbabwe become the society where people like myself and others in the diaspora feel so pulled to come to the country? And when we go back, there is systems in place where the society is actually, it's not just about society, actually. In fact, it's not necessarily about society. It's the infrastructure. The infrastructure within the country is working in a way that the country experiences growth.
So I've often talked about roads and hospitals, and when you when you're riding a motorcycle or driving a car, there's certain things that you notice around you, and the person who is in Zimbabwe at the moment notices the dilapidation of the roads, and we've known nothing better. But there is an engineer somewhere in England, in South Africa, in America, who is Zimbabwean. A lot has changed in how you build roads. And so the guy who stayed home stayed because either he couldn't leave, didn't have the opportunity to leave, or because of other circumstances that tied him there. The guy who left because he could leave. And then he had all these other opportunities, seeing how the world works. So the guy who stayed at home, if he really wants his life to transform and the life of his kids and his grandkids to be transformed properly, he requires the guy who left to come back home and say, let's work together. And this is how we can work together. This is how we can fix our country. This is how things are now done. So if I had stayed in Zimbabwe and I'd never left the country except to go on holiday, my global perspective of things would have been completely different. There are certain things that don't bother me, that bother someone at home, and politicians who ride on that to manipulate the politicians, the citizens. So I've never understood the fascination with homophobia or gay men or lesbians in African politics. It's used to manipulate people. Why should anyone be bothered about who sleeps with who? It's not an issue. But it becomes central to African politics that someone will say, I'm going to vote for this one because he's homophobic, and I'm also homophobic. And yet, we're not talking about hospitals. We're not talking about roads. We're not talking about jobs. We're not talking about the quality of life that our citizens deserve, like water, having clean running water. In Harare, the capital city of our country, there's no clean running water for years. I bought a property in 2001, one of the most affluent areas in Chisipiti. I last had water from council in 2005.
Wow.
And this is one of the most affluent areas. And yet we're bogged down in discussions about the Bible, about sexuality and things like that. And having left the country and lived abroad for quite a bit, it gave me a certain perspective of how sometimes we get used by politicians. And you can see that when you say something on social media, these guys don't understand that politicians work for them, should be working for them. When you vote for them, they're working for you.
Yeah.
But we idolize politicians. We idolize pastors. We idolize all these people. We treat them, they're like little gods. And I think it's to do with the exposure, because when you speak to a Zimbabwean who has lived abroad, who watches Newsnight, who watches Channel 4 News, their perspective is different because they now understand that leaders must be held to account for their actions.
Must be accountable.
But if leaders are treated like little gods, then you won't go far. And so in terms of what needs to happen, I think we need to change the mindset. You cannot transform Zimbabwe by just changing the politicians. The political class in Zimbabwe is the same. It's just that the other side doesn't have power yet. At a time when they got a bit of power, they behaved the same way. There was corruption in the GNU, but nobody talks about it because it's an inconvenient truth. There's corruption in councils that are run by our opposition, just as there's massive corruption. But Mnangagwa is the biggest godfather of corruption because he presides over a bigger empire. Those that are in councils, they've got smaller little empires, so they steal accordingly to what they control. And so what needs to change is the mindset. You know, Zimbabwe's leading ICE agent, Dr. Solomon Guramatun, always says to me, Hopewell, our leaders are a reflection of the society where they're coming from. They don't suddenly change because they are in ZANU-PF or they're in leadership. They are a reflection of where we come from. That's why you find that if you post a video of a police person receiving a bribe, you get criticized because they say, oh, you want them to lose their job. It means the mindset of the society says it's okay to do bribery, but don't get caught. You know, and if you expose somebody, oh, you want them to lose their job. So I think whoever takes over after ZANU-PF needs to focus on a psychological program to change the mindset. And I think the kind of democracy that we have, or that we think we have, will not work. We need to look at case studies like Singapore, where the founding father of that country was, I always call him an intellectual thug, because he understood that this society cannot be transformed by just democratic rights. You have to be tough. So the first thing he did, Lee Kuan Yew, was to make sure that he sets an example. So one of his ministers, one of his friends, went on holiday paid for by a businessman. And when he came back, he threw him into prison. Those shock treatments will be needed to transform the mindset of Zimbabweans, because you will just have a new leader, and the way people think, if it doesn't change, it means it's business as usual. Their guy is now in. Is another famous Zimbabwean, Dr. Ngosana Moyo, calls it my turn to eat. People are not fighting for real change. They're fighting for their turn to go and do the same things that ZANU-PF does. So you need to change the mindset of society. And for you to change the mindset of society, you also need people like yourself who have had an opportunity to interface with different societies at different levels. And someone like you has achieved a lot. If you go back home, if the system allows you to do what you need to do, then you become part of that transformation. Society doesn't just transform itself by voting for a new guy. If the new guy is not going to realize that the society needs to transform the way we think, if you go into offices in Zimbabwe, 12:30, you see a jacket, the person is gone. You wait for them, they will come maybe 2:30. And they had a 1 hour lunch, but they took 2 hours. That's part of the mindset that needs to change. That cannot be changed by just having a new leader who doesn't transform that society. People need to understand that it's important for me to keep time. If Nyasha says our interview is at 1:30, I must be there at 1:30. Yes.
Do you think, though, that taking this beyond Zimbabwe, but of course, I know we can speak a lot more specifically about Zimbabwe because we're from there, we've lived there, we've got the experience. Do you think that some people within certain societies in Africa or countries where we wouldn't say that the economy is running the way that it should and there is a deep imbalance, do you think that it's easy to get that mindset? Do you feel that people are like, at the end of the day, I have to just survive? So these things that you are saying probably are ideological and will never happen.
I think if I was the leader who takes over from ZANU-PF, I would make sure that those things happen, because you can't transform anything without doing those things. So for instance, if you look at Rwanda, Rwanda is not your traditional democracy like Britain or like South Africa. President Paul Kagame is a tough guy. But he had to do certain things for Rwanda to be where it is today. If you go to Rwanda today, people walk on pavements that are super clean. You won't even see a paper on the streets. And that had to do with the mindset. He had to transform. If you go back to the Rwanda of 1990s or 80s, if you go and look for the visuals of that Rwanda, and you look at how, like, let's say roads, streets were maintained, it's completely different. So a guy came in, tough as he is, but transformed that society. If you go to Rwanda today, you open a company in six hours. It's your company set up. You're registered. You're already there. I know the leadership of Rwanda. I've met President Kagame when I was receiving an award, but he's not somebody that I talk to. I've met one or two politicians, but whenever I've gone to Rwanda, I've never had to lean on that proximity to power to get things done. There's no need for that, because whatever you want is done properly and it's above board. So that's the transformation that we need. In Zimbabwe, if you go today, you will be told that, okay, you want a police clearance, the guy is supposed to sign, let's see what we can do. It's a call for corruption to say, pay me something.
Yeah, sounds very familiar.
That won't change by having a new leader who's not transformative. Okay,
but I do have to kind of interject there, because I can hear someone who's watching or listening who's then, okay, if we stick to the Kagame example, there is another side as well. What of those who will say, yes, he's transformed the nation and Rwanda is definitely a growing economy. That's undisputed. But what about the allegations of the critics who are, and the human rights abuses, and even the invasion of Congo, stealing the minerals and all that stuff, there would be some people who would say, wait, it's not a what would you say, not the word, it's not a fair comparison.
Yes.
What would you then say about that?
I'm not here endorsing the leadership or dismissing the leadership of Rwanda. I'm simply I'm just use this as an example of what transformation should look like.
Okay.
Of course, there are some bad things that happen in Rwanda or any society. I'm at the forefront of talking about corruption, but I'm also cognizant that in this country where we are in, there is corruption. I mean, Boris Johnson was giving his friends public procurement tenders for COVID, but it's about how you are able to turn the dial to a point where society is not in a situation like where Zimbabwe is right now, where you go to a hospital. I mean, a general just died in Zimbabwe because he went to 3 hospitals. He's part of the political elites. His wife is a senator.
Yeah.
His daughter is a professor, but he could not get a ventilator. So if you go to Rwanda, there are people that are going to tell you that, oh, Kagame has done this, Kagame has done that, is a bad guy, right? But for someone like myself who's not there, who's not going there to stir the pot, I'm just going there maybe on holiday or to do business. I look at these things and I'm like, oh, this guy has been able to fix the roads, there's water, there's electricity. These are the basic necessities that society needs.
Yeah.
So I've always said this. Africans, we are a product of different experiences. So the Rwandese experience is different from the South African experience. Is different from the Zimbabwean experience. I've had Africans who came to Zimbabwe and said, you talk too much. You live in a nice house like this. You how can you complain? You live like a king. But you talk too much. And I always say, I'm a product of my society. When I benchmark things today, I benchmark them against what I've known our society to be.
Yeah.
So someone coming from the Congo thinks I shouldn't talk because I live like a king in Zimbabwe. But someone coming from South Africa will be like, Hopewell, you're not doing enough. Look, these roads, you guys, you're walking on top of sewage. Because the experiences are different. And that's what I always say about Rwanda, that the Rwandese have had their own experience, the Tutsi genocide. So I sort of look at what Kagame does through those lenses to say he's coming from a different perspective from us. He has endured, his society has endured what we haven't endured. So perhaps we need to praise them more for what they're doing good. And for people like myself who are able to speak to some of the leaders, we should be able to say, oh, I think you need to do A, B, C, D in order not to be seen in this way, or in order not for your citizens who are complaining to feel this way. And when you look at Zimbabwe, if you ask any Zimbabwean who's in Zimbabwe today, that's the iron of life. Would you rather have Kagame or Mnangagwa? Try that on social media.
You know what? I think that is a very interesting question. Would you rather have President Kagame or President Mnangagwa? I would love to see in the comments what people think.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you who you would rather, but I do want to go.
Because that would be like rigging an election. So let's see what our viewers say.
Yeah.
You guys, would you rather have Emmerson Mnangagwa as your president or Paul Kagame as your president? And it would be great if you also tell us why you prefer this one or the other one.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. Why?
We'll be right back.
So, as someone with natural hair, I know all about the joys and sometimes the struggles of not only achieving but maintaining healthy hair. That's why I started using Bella Vista. These products have been so healthy and nourishing for my hair that I'm more confident wearing less wigs and more of my hair out and natural styles like these braids. Bella Vista isn't just another beauty brand. It's a movement, honey. Their all-natural products are designed to tackle hair loss, alopecia, and dryness whilst keeping your hair thriving. I've got 4 of their products right here, and trust me, they deliver. Plus, they don't just do products for hair, also for your skin. But let's talk firstly about this extreme hair growth. It will have you saying goodbye to balding, graying, and dandruff. This powerhouse nourishes from root to tip. And I live by Jamaican castor oil all day, every day. It's great for thickening your hair and strengthening those roots. But also, you know me, honey. I'm all about luxury. This Caviar Luxury Hair Growth and Shampoo will also nourish your scalp, leave your hair moisturized, and best of all, strengthen your hair. If you're ready for real results, check out Bella Vista today because good hair days should be every day. Now, let's get back to the show.
Now, back to the show.
I'm conscious of time, and I still want to ask you about some of the very intense, well, I think they're intense experiences that you've had. You've given us a really in-depth understanding of why you became the person that you are and why you stand up for the truth and you are not scared to expose the wrongdoers. And that's gotten you into what some may call trouble. And also, you've even had ministers, people like fired because of the work that you've done. Without me explaining to people, tell me about some of the investigative journalism that you've done and how it ended you in prison and how it was like being in prison. How did you feel?
I think the first time that I went to prison, I had never been to prison.
Yeah.
The first time I went to prison, I read an article written by a journalist called Elias Mambo. It was talking about some corruption that was happening around the COVID-19 procurement contracts. Mm-hmm. But it didn't go any further than that.
Yeah.
So I called the guy and I said, I've read your article. So I asked him so many questions. Mm. So I realized that, there's a lot happening here. Mm. And so I started investigating and I started getting documents about what was going on. And the president, his wife, and one of his children were at the center of it.
The president of Zimbabwe.
Yes, President Emerson Mnangagwa, and his son, and his wife. They were at the center of it. So every day it was like a crusade against corruption, specifically to this issue. There was a $60 million facility that has been put in place. And the president, the guy who was fronting getting these contracts. And so I then discovered that 1, the companies did not exist. And 2, the addresses where these companies are supposed to be domiciled, in Dubai, in Namibia, in South Africa, in Hungary, some didn't exist and some were just apartment blocks. And like in Hungary, it was like in a rundown area like Mbare.
Wow.
And so the acting spokesperson for ZANU-PF, Patrick Chinamasa, then held a press conference where a journalist who is currently in jail, Blessed Mklanga, asked a question about what I had said. And Chinamasa said that I'm bringing the name of the president into disrepute. I should stop what I'm doing. If I don't stop, there will be consequences. And he specifically said that Delish Ngwaya, who was getting these contracts, had no link at all with the president and his family, and they've never met him. You see? And then I then got a document after that press conference from someone in Secret Service to say, you've been bashed, but these people are not telling the truth. Here's evidence. So I got a document of the First Lady inviting Delish for dinner.
My way.
So I then put it out. And then I got pictures of one of the president's sons with Delish Ngwaya in China. And then I got pictures of them in a plane. They were just being playful on a plane. And I got pictures of them at a different party, a dinner party that was taking place. So I put them out. So it really pissed off Mnangagwa, because now I put him in a situation where he had said he didn't know this guy, and I put out this evidence. And he was so upset that he ordered my arrest.
Wow.
And so I had gone underground. I'd been warned by people in his system that he's coming after you. So I lived in, I've never talked about this, but I lived in someone's office from April to June.
You lived in someone's office?
Yes.
Wow.
And then I would get calls from international broadcasters wanting me to talk about these exposures. And then I'll have an interview. We'll have to put like something. I remember I did an interview with Al Jazeera where we had to put something in the back so that nobody knows where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
So the day I went back home, that's the day I was arrested. And they came, seven men came with AK-47s.
Wow.
And they hit my dining room door, which was all my, I had this, I bought a home in Chisipiti, and I thought I needed to give it a modern look.
Yeah.
So I turned it into a glass house.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that,
Easy for them to...
Yeah. I didn't realize that, it was going to play against me. So they went in, and as I heard them coming towards my bedroom, I then went on Facebook Live. So I broadcast them coming into my bedroom. And then they would say, put the phone down. So I put the phone down. And they thought that I was just recording.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that they are already online.
Live.
So it saved me, because their bosses then called them, what's going on? You're now on Facebook and blah, 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 blah. You were captured, as you arrested this guy.
Yeah.
What kind of foolishness is that? And I could hear them talking to their bosses. And I think it saved me, because I think they wanted to take me somewhere else and torture me.
Yeah.
But because the world now knew what had happened, their faces were there. They had to take me to the police station. I was there for 2 days, and I went to court. I was denied bail. The first time I went to prison, I spent 45 days.
Wow.
Then I came out of prison in September, and I got wind of the fact that the president's niece, who had been arrested by military officers trying to smuggle 6 kilograms of gold to Dubai, had been given, or the prosecutors had been given an instruction that they should not oppose bail.
Okay.
And then I wrote about it on social media. And then a day or two later, I was arrested again. Yeah. They first charged me for this, and then when my lawyer, my lawyer is very feisty, Beatrice Mtero, she was like, this charge you've brought, we are going to defend it this way. So she was narrowing them down until they charged me for what they really arrested me for, which was the tweet about the president's niece going to get bail. And so they said, who is your source? Because they knew it was true. I said, I don't divulge my sources. And they said, you go to prison? And I said, yes, I'll go to prison to protect my sources.
Wow.
So I went to prison. I was in prison. I was denied bail again. And then at the magistrate's court, because the magistrate's court is no longer a judiciary process. It's just a ZANO thing. When you go to the magistrate's court, you'll never get bail. So I went to the High Court. At that time, it was better. It's getting worse now. I got bail. So I spent, I think, about 25 days. And the third time was in January 2001. And this time they accused me of something I never did, used a law that does not even exist. They took me to court. I was denied bail at the Magistrates Court, and then I got bail when I went to the High Court. And this time when I came out, I was like, I don't care anymore, because at first you're scared of going to prison because they've never been there.
Yeah.
But when you go there, and they took me to the worst prison in Zimbabwe, which is one of the worst prisons in Africa. So I was like, there's nothing else beyond this. The only thing that's worse than this is killing me. So there was nothing to be afraid of anymore because I'd been there. And the prison officers were like my brothers. Some were even, I was even sending some of them to my home to go and get books for me.
Things. Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they were like, dude, you're fighting for all of us. And even the prisoners. I was the only prisoner at that time, and then it became the two of us, me and Job Scala, who was a political actor in Zimbabwe, opposition political actor in Zimbabwe. And we were getting hot water. They facilitated for us to get hot water, these prison officers, because that's how much they respected what we were doing. And they respected what we had been arrested for. They were like, you are fighting for us. I would get hot water. I would get books. I would send the prison officers to my home and say, go and tell my housekeeper that I need this book and that book. They would go and get it. And they would not even ask for anything.
Wow.
They felt that we were there because our fight was the good fight. And then I was released the third time. And then I came out one day, I was bored. I was sitting in my study.
Yeah.
And then I went back to my reggae days. And then just did a skit. And then I was singing, them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. So them loot means they loot,
Yeah.
It's Jamaican patois for they loot. So I posted it and then it went viral. And then there were so many versions of them loot now, which were being done by professional musicians.
Yeah.
And now I'm being called from Botswana. I'm being called by South African media. And then I'm being called by British media. And it was Lindsay Hilsum, the foreign news editor for Channel 4 News, did a piece on them loot on Channel 4 News.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I was saying things that the ordinary people want to be said.
Yeah.
It wasn't about, as I told somebody, it's not because there's anything special about me that I do a skit and then it goes viral. It's just that I'm touching on the real issues that politicians, opposition politicians, should be addressing. So that has been my beef with the main opposition leader in Zimbabwe, Nelson Chamisa, that you need to address these issues. I'm now in a space where I'm exposed as an activist because the politicians are not doing the work they're supposed to be doing collectively.
Okay.
You have individuals like Fadzai Mahere who are always tweeting about these issues. But no man is an island. You need a collective effort to talk about the brokenness of our society and to be specific that hospitals, now because of how I've been talking to citizens of Zimbabwe, you get to a point where people say, you should go into politics. You should go into politics. And I've said to Nelson, the fact that people are saying I should go into politics, it should be an indictment on you guys.
I was going to ask you, sorry to cut you off, but I was going to ask you, what do you say to those who say or who think that you have some political ambitions?
My message has been consistent. It's an indictment on the political class in Zimbabwe that a journalist is now seen as a beacon of hope for people.
Yeah.
And perhaps because I'm a trained communicator, I'm able to, but these are things that I've said repetitively. So if you now talk to an ordinary Zimbabwean, if you ask them how many women die every year giving birth, they will tell you the figure now.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask them how many radiotherapy machines are in Zimbabwe, they will tell you the figure.
Yeah.
Because I've been repetitive about it.
Mm.
And my beef with the opposition leaders is that you're not doing enough. You're getting elected and you go to parliament, you get a car, and it's business as usual. You know, at some point, I was so close to Nelson Chamisa that some of his people around him, he would come with them to my home and they would say, Nelson eats at your house. He doesn't eat at
Anyone
house.
else's house. He trusts you. You ain't for to poison him.
He doesn't even eat at diplomatic functions.
Wow.
But he eats at your house. And it's because my engagement with him, for me, was from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was saying, I need to help this guy. Because he's our beacon of hope. Even besides our differences that we have today, I still believe that he has an opportunity to collectively bring everyone on board and lead and not feel insecure that there is a professor there. Nobody's going to take your job. And I've said this to him so many times. I know he has said in the past that, you know, I have political ambitions because everyone feeds him this nonsense that, he's saying this because he wants a position. But I would prefer a situation where people like myself and yourself, we stay in our professions.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've done so well, that we're recognized, it means there was something that was missing in our society about our profession. And people now identify us. And I always say to politicians in the opposition that, are you not embarrassed that foreign leaders now look for a journalist to have a discussion about what's happening in Zimbabwe? I come here to England, go to the Commonwealth, they ask me about what's happening in Zimbabwe. This should be stuff for politicians, not a journalist. But I've stepped in to say, okay, I'll do it, you know, because nobody else is doing it at that level. Right now, we've got a journalist who's in prison, Blessed Mhlanga, who has been arrested for exposing that the president of the country wanted to steal a publicly owned bank, the People's Own Savings Bank, and for giving an interview to a war veteran and former ZANU-PF MP, Blessed Geza, who's opposing Mnangagwa's attempt to violate the constitution and extend his term of office. And the politicians should be at the center of fighting against this repression. But it's me who's having to do this. And the tragedy about our society is that, unlike many other societies, as I said, politics is very binary. You actually have people that will wage a vendetta against you, running websites, saying, you know, lies. The British government had to intervene in 2011 to issue a statement through its embassy to say, no, it's not true. Hopewell is not a fraudster. No, it's not true. Hopewell is not wanted in Britain. No, and this letter is now in the public domain. And it's so embarrassing for a country that we try to destroy each other to a point where we create lies about others and try to package them as truth. And I understand where this started. It was the state, the Secret Service. But it shocks me when people, even in the opposition, try to repackage these lies and use them. And yet you're fighting for a cause that they pretend or purport to be fighting for. So that's why I was talking about, Nyasha, that we need to recalibrate our mindset.
The way we think.
Way we think. Because the way people behave in ZANU, the supporters behave towards their leaders in ZANU, is the same way the supporters in the opposition behave towards their leaders as well.
Okay.
Hopelessly loyal to a fault, treating them like little gods, and defending them instead of defending a cause. Once you follow individuals, you get lost because individuals are fallible. We make mistakes. We should have a cause, and we should have a set of ideas that gets us to complete the mission around that cause. But when we say, I support Mnangagwa, so if Mnangagwa steals public funds, I can't, he's my leader, he's the leader of my party. I mean, you can't build a society like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's been very interesting hearing your perspective of things. You are very vocal, but to sit down and hear these stories, particularly what you said about, I've never spoken about this before. I appreciate you sharing that. It's been interesting hearing the stories about you, your upbringing, and how reggae music has had such an impact into the person that you are now. It leads me nicely to a segment that we call Pass the Mic. Now, on Pass the Mic, a previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. And I'm very interested in hearing your answer for this. Our last guest was Azania Stewart, who is an Olympian. She's a basketball player. I had a really great, fun, interesting conversation with her recently. And her question that she left for you to answer is, what would your younger self tell you now?
Wow, that is a very interesting question. What would my younger self tell me now? I think over time we make a lot of mistakes. The decisions that we make, and I think my younger self would have said to me, "You shouldn't have gone back to Zimbabwe.
Really?
Look at how much time you wasted. Look at how much money you would have made if you had stayed in England." But the older me would respond to the younger me and say, it's not about money. It's about the impact my work has had on my country.
Yeah.
And how I've been able to, as Bob Marley used to call it, you give your more to receive your less.
Okay.
It's not about what you get. It's about what society gets.
Okay.
If I look at the first documentary film that I made, that won the African Journalist of the Year award, and the impact it had, it was on HIV and AIDS, and the impact it had on mobilizing drugs for Zimbabweans. If I had not done that film, a lot of people would have died. The fact that the film made a difference, it could never ever surpass any amount of money I would have made if I had stayed in Britain and not gone back home.
Wow.
So if our work touches society and helps society, that's enough, because at the end of the day we're all going to die and leave everything. But if you are able to save lives, if you are able to have an impact on your society, I'll tell you a story. I've always been called by ZANU-PF and the Zimbabwean government a Western puppet to try and delegitimize my work. And when I won the United Nations International Anti-Corruption Award in Qatar, and it was presented to me by the Emir of Qatar and the President of Rwanda, it was the first time they couldn't call me a Western puppet, because this was an African leader and an Eastern leader giving me an award from the United Nations, which Zimbabwe is part of. And this award is acknowledging the very things that make my government angry about me: corruption. When I won my second African Journalist of the Year award in 2020, again in 2021, again it was on recognition of my exposures involving the president and his family on the COVID thing. Again, this award was coming from Nigeria, not from Britain, not from America. And And that in itself, coming back to the question left by your previous guest, shows me that my going to Zimbabwe and doing my work from Zimbabwe has had such a huge impact that a board like the UN, Emir of Qatar, they realize that you're doing this great work. And I've been asked to I've just finished writing an article for the Rule of Center in Qatar. And these are not Western countries. And to me, it means how others have always, especially those around me, have said to me, you shouldn't have wasted your time going to Zimbabwe. And I'm like, no, I don't think I wasted my time. I think I saved my society, and I saved it in a way that will be remembered in the future. And I think that's more important than any money that we can get today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, Hopewell, you have what I like to call the pleasure of being my final guest for season 1 of With Nyasha Michelle. So that means you won't necessarily be leaving pass the mic question to another guest, but I want you to do something special. I want you to leave a question for our audiences, maybe something that gets them thinking, gets them pondering. And because I want this show to be a show that, yes, people can come and be entertained, they can be inspired, they can feel like, oh wow, I learned something new today. But I definitely want it to be something that also gets them to think more, to be motivated. That's not me putting my words into your mouth and what type of question that you can ask, but something that adds value. So what would be your pass the mic question for those watching?
So my pass the mic question for you guys who are watching this wonderful program is, what do you think is the role of politicians in society? How do you engage with politicians in society? Should you adore them? Should you show them adulation? Or should you hold them to account for the actions that they make, the promises that they make? And do you realize or understand the difference between the two? That if you show adulation, what kind of politician are you creating and what kind of society will you get? If you hold them to account, tell us what kind of society do you think you're creating, and how do you think it will have an impact on the everyday life of ordinary citizens wherever you are?
Jeez. Wow. Even if I have to think about how I would answer that question, it definitely would leave me in deep thought. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
I think it's a really great question. Or they are great questions, because I know y'all are thinking, that's not just one, but that's okay. Now I go into trending. It's a segment where we kind of speak about some subjects within your industry or something pertaining to you, either trending or that, I guess, makes a difference, right? And my first question for you for this segment is, you've trended before, but if you could go viral for anything apart from your journalism, what would it be?
I think if I could go viral for anything about the society where we live in, I think I would like one day to talk about how Zimbabweans now have access to good hospitals, and I go and cover that, and it goes viral across the continent. I would like to do what I would call a good news story, something that gives people hope.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you something that I did that makes me say that. In 2019, there was a doctor called Mashumba. She cried in front of the health minister because she said the hospitals don't have anything. She was the head of the pediatric section at Paranyat Hospital, which is the biggest medical center, publicly owned medical center in Zimbabwe. And so I was sitting at home, drinking my whiskey, and I was like, we need to do something. This lady cried, and it really touched me. And so I set up what I called Save Our Hospitals. Save Our Hospitals was supposed to save the hospitals, basically. And we brought in millions worth of goods, consumables coming from Britain mainly. I gave a challenge to nurses in Britain. I said, I know you work in a ward where you throw away things.
Yeah.
Don't throw them away. Give us those things. So I set up a board. I called, that's the good thing about being a journalist. No one says no to you. So I called top executives in Zim. The CEO of Standard Bank, Pindi Nyandoro, my lawyer, Beatrice Mtetwa, former mayor of Harare, Ben Manyeni, Dr. Charles Mashude is one of the pioneering HIV consultants in Britain. Dr. Guramatuni, so many people, Professor Ndlovu, who is one of the characters in my first documentary film on HIV and AIDS. And I brought them together because I needed them to guide me, to say, this is how we're going to do. And we were chaired by a man of God who's the former bishop of the Anglican Church, Bishop Kandia. And so this stuff came in, and I was so happy, and I was so excited, and I was like, you know what? This is really good. We're transforming from a bad situation to a better situation. It's not exactly how we would like transformation to happen. We would like it to happen through tax dollars. But if it means we have to provide an alternative, then so I hope, coming back to your question, that one day I'll be able to go to Zimbabwe. I can't go to Zimbabwe now. I'm in exile. I hope I'll be able to go back to Zimbabwe and cover, sort of hospitals working.
I like the good news part. That definitely, especially as a journalist myself who's covered a lot of African stories. Yeah. Of course, there are sometimes you have to do what you have to do and you have to expose wrongdoings. But there's something that happens to the soul when you yourself are covering stories that actually are inspiring others, and others are consuming those stories. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
And Africa is so desperate for good stories. Have you noticed that? Yeah. Have you noticed that each time there's a good story about anywhere in Africa, it goes viral?
Yeah.
Anywhere in Africa. It shows you how much we are starved of good stories. And it's an indictment on our leadership as well. That's why, some of us, when we travel, even if I go to a dictatorship and I see a good story, I'm like, oh my God, guys, can you believe?
Let's focus on that.
This is a good story.
Yeah.
Let's forget about this dictatorship for a moment.
Yeah.
And the tragedy, Nyasha, is that in Zimbabwe, there are very, 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 very few good stories to report about today. It's always about hospitals not working, roads potholed, money being stolen, president presiding over corruption. It's always about bad things. And so I hope that you and I will be able to go and make a documentary about good things when they happen.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you say that, because that's what I was going to say. I really hope and pray that we get to do more of that. Because it gets a bit much. I've had people talk to me about, and ask me, what's it like being a journalist and stuff? And sometimes they'll ask me, what do you specialize in? And I've said, of course, I can, whatever I need to do, I'll do it. It's my job. I can cover, different types of stories, right? Current affairs, whatever it is. But there is a part of me that's just been like, you know what? There is enough negative stories out there. So if there's a story that is inspiring, a change maker, something different that we're doing, let's celebrate that, because the others, there's plenty of them. So my second trending question for you is, if there was a biopic about Hopewell Chin'ono, who would play you, one? And then two, what is one scene that you would insist has to be included?
Wow, you've put me on the spot. As a filmmaker, the one part that I think has to be part of this film is my struggles fighting corruption. I think it's important. I think if there's one thing that I would like society to remember about my work, it is that aspect. And I'll explain. It's important because it speaks into why people are suffering today.
Okay.
It speaks to why people do not have clean drinking water today. So I think it's a historical aspect that has to be in there, because future generations, even when we finally get Zimbabwe right, they need to remember that in the same way that the Jews remember the Holocaust and they say we don't want to go there again. Who would I like to play me?
Yes.
So are you talking about like people that are known or any random person?
Let's start with... Okay, no, not let's start with, because I need to just give you one. Let's maybe say someone who's people who are known.
I think if I wanted if it got to that,
Yeah.
I think the one actor that I think would do justice, who understands the kind of things that I've done, who has a bit of music in them, who's a good actor. I think it would be Will Smith.
Will Smith.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it would be Will Smith. I think Will Smith has gone through music.
Yeah.
So I think it will be easy for him to understand what I've gone through with reggae music.
Okay.
Although for him it was hip hop.
Yeah.
The other one I would have liked to play me, but I think it would be too high all the time, is Snoop Dogg.
Those are they're on two different spectrums.
So I grew up listening to Snoop Dogg.
Okay.
If I had to choose between Will Smith and Snoop Dogg from a music perspective, I'm a Snoop Dogg type of person.
Okay.
But if I have to choose about the work that I've been doing and the seriousness that it requires, it will be Will Smith.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was very, very interesting. Well, Snoop Dogg and Will Smith, if you guys are listening or watching, hit up Hopewell, okay? I just want to be there when at least you start the filming, just for me to see how it all goes. But, Hopewell, it's been an incredible conversation with you.
Thank you
Your
so
life
much.
has got a lot of, I don't know, so many aspects of it that I'm sure a lot of people are intrigued about. And not a lot of us possess that bravery to call out, the big dogs and still continue doing it.
No, but you do it.
I don't know. Let's just say that people like myself, we're inspired by people like you, and I'm just keen to continue seeing what else you're going to be continuing to do. Once you come on the With Nyasha Michelle show, please just know you're a friend of the show. So you're more than welcome to come back again.
No, thank you. Thank you. To be a pleasure. I was thinking, what does she want to ask me? Is this about politics? What is it about? So when I walked in and the producer say to me, it's about you, I said, oh, that's easy.
Yeah, definitely. We want people,
I just
your
had
fans
to remember.
Yeah, exactly. We want people to get to know you, and hopefully, those of you who've been watching and listening feel like you've gotten to know Hopewell a little bit better. But before I let you go, would you want to talk to people there, tell them about where they can find you? And I know you're very vocal on social media, so it's not going to be a difficult one.
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm on Twitter. It's Daddy Hope, DADDYHOPE. And I'm on Facebook again. It's Hopewell Chin'ono. You won't miss the page. And I'm here on Instagram. It's Daddy Hope 02, and or if you just put my name Hopewell Chin'ono, it will come up. And I'm also on TikTok. You just put my name and it will come up. And all these accounts are verified except for the one on TikTok.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and not only joining me, but being the final guest for the show.
Such an honor.
And for those of you
end.
you know what? It's the beginning. It's the beginning, because this has been a very, very interesting journey.
Yes.
Very I've learned a lot. Let's just say that. And for those of you who have been tuning in to with Nyasha Michelle, whether you've watched and listened to every episode or this is your first one, thank you so much for the support. We love you. Get in touch. Let me know who you think I should be sitting next to and interviewing soon. And don't forget to follow Nyasha Michelle on social media or at with Nyasha Michelle as well on Instagram, YouTube, and subscribe if you are not subscribing, or listen wherever you get your podcasts. For now, it's just see you later, not goodbye. Thank you, guys.